The man who walked into my shop was bleeding, and the first thing I noticed was not the blood. It was the way his jacket hung wrong on his left shoulder. But that comes later. Let me start where it almost ended. It is a little after 1 in the morning, and I am standing on a marble floor the color of old bone, in a house I was never meant to see, holding a broken pocket watch, in a hand that will not stop shaking. There is blood on the cuff of my blouse, and it is not mine. Across the room, a man with winter gray eyes is looking at me the way no one has looked at me in years, like I am the only true thing left in a room full of lies. "Vivian," he says, just my name. The way he says it, you would think it was something worth saying. Behind me on the stairs, another man is bleeding out on the cold stone, and I am the reason. I am 52 years old. 2 years ago I buried my husband and quietly began to disappear, the way women my age are taught to disappear, and I told myself I had made my peace with being invisible. I want you to understand how a forgotten seamstress ends up holding the only thing a dangerous man ever loved, with another man's blood drying on her sleeve. So let me take you back. 6 weeks. Back to the wrong jacket and the right shoulder. The shop is called Coal and Sun, though there is no sun and there is barely a coal anymore. My husband Daniel hung that sign 40 years ago, before I ever knew him, and when he died 2 springs back, I did not have the heart to change it or the money to repaint it. It sits on the corner of Atwells Avenue and a side street in the part of Providence everyone calls Federal Hill, under a green awning that has gone the color of a tired olive. The bell over the door is the same bell that has hung there since the Carter administration. Most days it does not ring at all. That night it rang at 20 minutes to midnight. I was in the back, hemming a pair of trousers for a man who had not picked them up in 3 weeks, and probably never would, because I could not sleep, and the shop was the only place that still felt like mine. The rest of the building belonged, on paper, to my brother-in-law. The apartment upstairs felt like a hotel room I had checked into and forgotten to leave, but the shop, with its smell of pressed wool and machine oil, and the chalk I have used so long. My fingers are always a little white. The shop was still home. We close at 6. The sign was turned. I thought it was the wind, or a drunk, or one of Glenn's people coming to talk about the lease again. Then a voice from the front said, "I need a tailor who keeps his mouth shut." I came through the curtain wiping chalk on my apron, and there he was. He was tall, taller than the doorway wanted him to be, and dressed in a charcoal suit that had cost more than I make in a season. I knew that the way I know everything, by looking at how it was made. Hand-rolled lapels, a buttonhole stitched, not machined. Canvas floated inside the chest, not glued. Whoever cut that suit knew exactly what they were doing, and it was ruined. There was a dark stain spreading along his left side, under the jacket, soaking through the fine gray cloth, and he was holding his arm against it, the way you hold a door shut against something on the other side. It was the only thing I could think to say. I can see that. His eyes moved over the shop, over the bolts of fabric and the headless mannequins and me, taking all of it in at once and missing nothing. "You're the tailor. I'm the tailor. Good." He took a step in, and the bell over the door went quiet behind him. "I need stitches." Not in the suit. I should have called for help. I should have picked up the phone on the wall and dialed for an ambulance, and let the night swallow whatever this was. I was a 52-year-old widow alone after midnight with a bleeding stranger, and every sensible bone in my body told me to pick up that phone. Instead, I said, "Sit down before you fall down." There was a wooden chair by the fitting mirror, the one where I have men stand to be measured. He lowered himself into it slowly, the way a much older man would, and I saw the cost of it move across his face for just a second before he put it away again. That did not show pain easily. It made the moment it slipped through more honest. "Take off the jacket," I said, carefully. "It's a good jacket." That earned me something. Not a smile. The ghost of one, there and gone. "You're worried about the jacket. I'm worried about whoever cut it. Off." He worked the jacket off his shoulders, one arm at a time, and I helped him with the left because he could not manage it alone. And I folded it over the back of the chair the way you fold a flag. Underneath, his shirt was soaked through dark and wet on the side. The white gone, the rusty brown of dried blood near the edges, and bright red where it was fresh. "How long ago?" I said, already reaching for my scissors. "An hour." "And you came to a tailor." "I came to someone who would not write it down." His eyes found mine and held them. They were a strange pale gray, the color of the harbor in February, and there was a thin white scar that ran up through his left eyebrow and stopped, like a road that had washed out. Hospitals keep records. Records become other people's property. I cut his shirt open along the seam, which is a sin in my trade, and a mercy in any other, and looked at what was underneath. It was a long, shallow slice running along his ribs, 4 inches, maybe 5, the edges clean. Not a bullet. A blade, and a good one. A blade that knew what it was doing, the same way the man who cut his suit had known. He was not going to die in my chair. Not from this. Next to it, lower on his side, was an old wound, round and puckered and pale with years of healing. I had seen a wound like that once before on Daniel, years ago, before I knew enough to ask the right questions. I did not ask now either. "This needs closing," I said, "properly. But it will hurt. Because I have nothing to numb it. I sew cloth, not people." "You've sewn people before." I had. My grandmother taught me to sew before I could read, on a foot-pedal machine in a kitchen in Cranston. And somewhere along the 40 years between then and now I had closed cuts on my own hands, and once badly, on Daniel's forehead, when he was too proud to go in. But I did not tell this stranger any of that. "Hold still," is what I told him. "I have a needle I keep for heavy work, curved, the kind you use for upholstery, and I have silk thread that is finer and stronger than anything they will sell you at a pharmacy, and I have hands that do not shake when there is a job in front of them. I cleaned the wound with the only thing I had, a bottle of clear liquor Daniel kept in the back for exactly the kind of night he never lived to see, and the man did not make a sound. He watched my face the whole time. Not the needle, my face. "You first." The corner of his mouth moved. "Lorenzo, Lorenzo what?" "Just Lorenzo, for tonight." I tied off the 5th stitch. Then I'm just the tailor. For tonight. He laughed at that, quietly, and the laugh pulled at his side, and the pull cut the laugh short, and for a moment his hand closed hard over the arm of the chair, the knuckles going white. On his little finger there was a heavy band of dark metal, not gold, something older and plainer, and tucked into the small pocket of his ruined vest was the round shape of a watch on a chain. "You'll want to keep it dry," I said, working. 3 days at least. No reaching, no lifting, nothing that stretches this side. The thread will hold, but the skin underneath is the part that matters. It comes out in 10 days. You'll need someone to take it out, who knows how, or you'll tear it open. You'll take it out. I won't. I cut the last thread and pressed a clean square of muslin over the line of stitches and taped it down with the medical tape I keep for blistered heels. There, 17 stitches, neater than you deserve. He looked down at his own side, at the small even ladder of black silk holding him together, and something in his face changed. It was not gratitude exactly. It was closer to surprise, as if neatness was a thing he had stopped expecting from the world. "Where did you learn to sew a line like that?" he said. "My grandmother. She made wedding dresses for half of Federal Hill, and she would have whipped me for using upholstery thread on skin." I stood and put my hands on the small of my back, which had been bent too long. "Now I really do need you to leave. It's late, and I have a lease meeting in the morning that I am going to lose." He did not leave. He reached inside his folded jacket, the good one, and took out a billfold and counted off bills the way other men count off heartbeats without looking, and held them out to me. There were more hundreds in his hand than I had seen at one time since the day we sold Daniel's car. "No," I said. His eyebrow, the scarred one, went up. "You did the work." "I don't take cash from people who won't give me their last name. It's a thing my husband taught me. He's dead, but the rule isn't." For a long moment Lorenzo looked at me, and I had the distinct feeling of being measured, the same feeling I give other people every day of my life, the tape going around them while they pretend it is not happening. But I did not like being on this side of it. "Your husband," he said. "He owned this shop. He did. Cole and Son. There's no son. There's no son." I held the door for him. The bell ready over my head. "Good night, Lorenzo. Keep it dry." He stood slowly and put his ruined jacket over his arm, and at the door he stopped close enough that I could smell him. Cigars and cold air, and something underneath that was just clean. He looked at me one more time, that February Harbor gray going over my face like he was reading a label sewn on the inside. "You're not afraid of me," he said. It was not a question. "I'm 52 years old, and I've buried a husband, and I'm about to lose my shop," I said. "I ran out of fear sometime around Tuesday." Fuller this tall. "Good night, Taylor." Came back. "Good night, Taylor," he said, and the bell rang once behind him, and he was gone into the dark of Atwell's Avenue. And I told myself that was the end of it. It was not the end of it. It was the first measurement. I did lose the meeting, or I should say my brother-in-law won it, which has always amounted to the same thing. Glenn Cole is Daniel's younger brother, and he is the kind of man who has spent his whole life being the lesser of two brothers, and has decided, somewhere in his late 40s, that the way to fix that is to own everything the better brother built. When Daniel died, it turned out the building was not in Daniel's name and mine, the way I had always believed. It was in a partnership. Daniel and Glenn set up decades ago when they were young and trusting, and Daniel had never changed it. And now Glenn held the larger share, and the shop sat on his land and paid him rent that went up every single year. He came in at 10 the next morning in a sport coat I would not have used to wax a floor, and he sat in the measuring chair where Lorenzo had bled the night before. And he told me the rent was going up again. "Times are hard, Viv," he said, which is what he always said, while wearing a watch that cost more than my month. "I've got the bank to think about." "You've got the bank to think about," I repeated. "I'm doing you a favor. You know what this corner would lease for to a restaurant." I knew. He told me every time. I sat at Daniel's old cutting table while Glenn talked, because hands tell me things faces try to hide. Glenn's hands were soft and restless. He kept touching his cuffs, his collar, the watch, the way a man touches things when he is lying and wants something to do with the part of him that knows it. "How much?" I said finally. He told me. It was more than I made. We both knew it. He smiled when he said it, and the smile is the part I want you to remember, because it is the smile of a man who has already decided how a thing is going to end and is only being polite enough to let you find out slowly. Don't think too long. He stood, and on his way out he stopped to look at the suits on the rack, the finished work, and he said, almost to himself, "Funny. Danny could never make this place pay either." And then he left, and the bell rang the same as it does for everyone, and I sat in the quiet and did the math I already knew the answer to. There was no answer. In 2 months, 3 at the most, Cole and Son would close, and I would be a 52-year-old widow with a sewing machine and no place to put it, and the last thing in the world with Daniel's name on it would come down off that corner, and a sign for somebody's 3rd location of a pasta chain would go up in its place. I want you to understand that I had accepted this. That is the part that shames me now, looking back. I had folded my whole life up small and put it in a drawer, the way you put away clothes for a season you are not sure will come again. And I had told myself this was wisdom, this was being realistic, this was what a sensible woman my age did. And then the bell rang again 3 days later, and everything I had folded up came back out. It was a man in a dark suit time, younger, built like a refrigerator, with an earpiece and the kind of stillness that men learn in only a few professions, none of them legal. "Mrs. Cole," he said, not a question. "Mr. Marchetti would like to see you." "I don't know any Mr. Marchetti. You took out his stitches Tuesday." A pause. "You didn't actually. That's the problem. You said 10 days. It's been 3, and he's torn one and it's getting hot, and he won't go anywhere that writes it down." Another pause. "He asked for you, Marchetti." So that was the last name. I had heard it. Everyone who has lived in this city as long as I have has heard the name Marchetti, the way you hear thunder a long way off and know not to plan a picnic. It was the name on no business and every story. It was the name people said quietly in the back of the Salumeria when they thought the children were not listening. "I have a shop to run," I said, which was almost funny. The man looked very slightly up. He was kind enough not to say anything. "He's offering to pay," he said instead, generously, "in case the money didn't move you." He took a breath, like he was repeating something he did not fully understand. "He said to tell you," the thread held. I stood there with my hand on the cutting table, and I felt the drawer I had folded my life into slide open another inch. "Give me 10 minutes, I heard myself say. "I need my kit." The car they put me in was black and silent, and the windows were so dark, the morning looked like dusk. We drove out of the hill, and along the bay, and up into the part of the state where the houses cannot be seen from the road, where the driveways have gates, and the gates have men, and the whole time the man with the earpiece said nothing, and I held my sewing kit on my lap like a life vest. The house, when we finally reached it, was not what I expected. I think I expected gold, marble lions, the kind of money that shouts. Instead, it was long and low, and made of stone and glass, and it had the same quality above the water, and it had the same quality the good suit had had, the quality of being expensive in a way that did not want you to notice. Whoever built it had taste. That frightened me more than gold would have. Taste means a mind behind the money. and a mind is harder to manage than a wallet. They walked me up a stone path and through a door, and through rooms that got quieter and richer as we went, until we came to a room at the back with a wall of glass that looked out over gray water, and there, in a low chair with a blanket over his legs like an old man which I knew he would hate, was Lorenzo Marchetti. He looked worse than 3 nights ago. The gray of his eyes was the only bright thing about him. The rest had gone sallow, and there was sweat at his hairline. And when he saw me, something in his shoulders let go, just slightly, the way a held breath lets go. "You came," he said. "You tore my stitches." I crossed the room and set my kit on the table beside him, and did not wait for permission. I told you, no reaching." There was an older man standing by the window, silver-haired, broad, with a face like a closed door. He moved toward me when I opened my kit, and Lorenzo lifted one hand off the arm of the chair, just 2 fingers, and the older man stopped where he stood. "This is Tom," Lorenzo said. "He doesn't trust you." "He shouldn't," I said, peeling back the dressing I had taped on 3 nights before. "He doesn't know me." Underneath, the line of my stitches had gone angry, the skin around them red and tight and hot, and 1 stitch at the bottom had pulled clean through, leaving the wound gaping a 1/2 inch and weeping. "There, you did this. Reaching for something, weren't you? Something you wanted more than you wanted to heal." He did not answer, which was an answer. "This is infected," I said. "Not badly, not yet." "Hank, but it's going the wrong way, and if you let it go another 2 days, you'll be in a hospital whether your records like it or not, or you'll be in the ground. And your friend Tom by the window can decide which of those he'd prefer." I looked up at Tom. "I need clean water that's been boiled. Better thread than I have, if you've got a doctor on a string somewhere, which I'm guessing you do. And whatever pills he's been refusing to take." Tom Lorenzo looked at me, and the ghost of the smile came back, even sallow and sweating as he was. "Do what she says," he told the room. It took an hour to set him right. I opened the bad stitch, cleaned what had crept in, closed it again with the good thread the doctor on the string sent over, and started him on the pills. He had been too stubborn to swallow. The whole time Tom watched me from the window like I was a snake that had come in under the door, and the whole time Lorenzo watched my face. And the room was quiet, except for me telling him when something would sting. I asked, tying off. "I don't trust him with my body when I'm weak," Lorenzo said. "Only when I'm strong. There's a difference. And you trust me. You sewed me up with upholstery thread, and then refused my money and threw me out of your shop because I wouldn't give you my last name." He shifted, and winced, and went still. "Yes, I trust you. And you talked your way onto it without trying." I did not know what to do with that, so I packed up my kit. "It'll hold this time if you let it. I mean it, about the reaching." "Stay," he said. I stopped with my hand on the clasp. "I have a shop. You have a shop. You're going to lose in 2 months." His gray eyes did not move off me. "I know about the lease, Vivian. I know about Glenn. I know your husband signed a partnership in 1982, that he never had the sense to undo. And I know your brother-in-law has been raising your rent every year since the funeral, timing it to the season your work is slowest, which is not an accident, which is a man squeezing a stone to watch it give up water." The room had gone very still. I set down my kit. "How do you know that?" I said. "I know everything about everyone who comes into my house, even the ones who come to fix my body." He said it without apology. "Vivian Cole, 52, married Daniel Cole at 24, No children, widowed 2 years ago this April. He died of a heart attack in the back of the shop, alone, on a Sunday. You found him Monday morning. Since then, you have paid down $40,000 of his medical debt out of a business that does not earn $40,000. You have not bought yourself one new thing, and you have let your brother-in-law take the only thing your husband left you, because grief made you tired, and tired women are the easiest thing in the world to take from. I should have been afraid. Some far-off part of me was anger. You had no right, I said. There's that word. The smile, faint and tired. Right. Such a delicate little word. People who use it have usually never had to take anything in their lives. You investigated me, my husband, his death. He leaned his head back against the chair, and for the first time I saw how much the hour had cost him. And before you decide I'm a monster for it, ask yourself this. In 2 years, did anyone else look closely enough at your life to see that you were being robbed? He let that sit. The water moved gray behind the glass. No, he said gently when I did not answer. They didn't. Because a woman your age, alone doing honest quiet work, is the most invisible thing in America. I see you because seeing things is how I have stayed alive. And what I see, Vivian, is a woman holding a knife to her own throat and calling it being sensible. I left that day. I want to be clear about that. I took the money he made me take, $4,000 in an envelope, and I went home and I put it on the kitchen table and I sat looking at it half the night, and I told myself I would never go back. I went back. He sent the car on Thursday and the Tuesday after that, and somewhere in those weeks of changing dressings and watching that long angry line knit itself slowly closed, the shape of my days changed, and the shape of me changed with it. He was not what the name Marchetti had taught me to expect. He was quiet. He read, all the time, books in 3 languages stacked beside the low chair. He noticed things the way I notice things, except where I read cloth while he read people, and he was so much better at it than me that being in the room with him was like sitting next to a fire, warm and dangerous in equal measure. He asked me questions no one had asked me in years. What did I want before Daniel? Did I ever want children, truly, or had I only wanted to be wanted? What I would make, if I could make anything, with no one to please but myself. No one had asked me what I wanted since I was a girl. I had forgotten the muscle it takes to answer. It was the housekeeper who first made me feel less like a stranger inside those walls. Her name was Renata, and she was somewhere in her 40s, dark-haired, quick-handed, with the kind of watchful kindness you only find in people who have learned to read a powerful man's moods to survive him. She brought me coffee the second day, real coffee, in a small cup, and she stayed a moment longer than she needed to. He sleeps now, she said, nodding toward the room where Lorenzo was finally resting. He didn't, before you came. 3 days, no sleep. Tom was worried. We were all worried. She set the cup down. Whatever you said to him that first night in your shop, no one says things like that to him. And he liked it. So, I will bring you good coffee, and you will keep him alive, and we will both pretend this is a normal thing that is happening. I asked her how long she had worked for him. Since I was 19, she said. My father owed money to the wrong men. And Marchetti bought the debt, and he gave me a job and a room, and never once asked for anything I did not want to give. People hear the name and they think one thing. She picked up the empty tray. I have worked in his house for half my life. I am not afraid of him. I am only afraid for him. There is a difference, and you, I think, already know it. She was right. I already knew it. And every cup of coffee she brought me, after that, was a small door opening in a house I had been brought into against my will. Until somewhere in those weeks, the house stopped feeling like a cage, and started feeling like a place where people who had been hurt looked after one another, which is the most dangerous thing a cage can ever start to feel like. He told me things back, slowly, the way you let out a hem, an inch at a time. One afternoon, when the wound had healed enough that he could stand without the cost showing on his face, he asked me to make him a suit, not repair one. Make one from nothing, the way Daniel used to, the way, almost the no one orders anymore. He stood in front of the long mirror in the glass room, and I took his measurements the way I have taken 1,000 men's measurements, the tape going around him while he stood still, and it was the most ordinary thing in the world, and somehow it was not ordinary at all, because measuring a man teaches you his body the way nothing else does. I learned the old bullet scar low on his side, and the long line of my own stitches, and 3 other marks I did not ask about, and the way he held his left shoulder a half-inch higher than his right, an old habit, a guarding the body of a man who had spent 40 years expecting to be hit. I have measured grooms and bankers and old men being buried. I had never measured anyone who held himself, like he was always, even asleep, ready to be attacked. You're guarding the left, I said, marking it down. You've done it so long you don't feel it. It throws your whole line off. Whoever cuts your suits has been compensating for it for years and never told you, because rich men don't like being told they're crooked. He looked at me in the mirror. Both of us reflected the dawn and the tailor. And you'll tell me, I'll cut you straight and make you stand straight, I said. It'll feel wrong for a week. Then it'll feel like nothing was ever wrong. You forget it was ever crooked. He was quiet a moment. Are we still talking about the suit? He said. I did not answer that. I wrote down the measurement and moved the tape to his chest, and my hands were steady. And his heart under my hands was not. He told me about his father one gray afternoon when the rain came sideways off the bay and we were the only 2 people in that whole stone house who were not pretending to be busy. His father's name was Gennaro. He built the family from nothing, from a fish market and a loan and a willingness to do the things other men would not, and he made friends and he made enemies. And the night Lorenzo turned 19, the enemies decided Gennaro had grown too large to leave standing. They did it at the restaurant, Lorenzo said. He was turning the pocket watch over in his hands as he spoke, the round silver one on the chain, opening and closing the case without looking at it. My father owned a restaurant on the water, the real business behind the other business, the place where everything was decided. The whole family was there. A man my father trusted came in late, apologized for being late, kissed my father on both cheeks, and sat down at our table. 20 minutes later he stood up to make a toast, and instead of raising a glass, he raised a gun. He opened the watch case and showed me the face. The hands had stopped. They were stopped at 11 minutes past 9. It was in his pocket. A bullet went through it. The watch and my father, the same shot. It stopped at the minute he died. I have kept it stopped. I have never had it fixed. He closed the case. I was 19. I had a gun of my own under the table because my father had taught me to, and I used it, and I will not tell you what I did with it. Because you change a little every time someone tells you a true thing about themselves. and I have changed you enough. I looked at him, this powerful man with his father's death stopped in his hand, and I did the thing I should not have done. I reached over and I put my hand over his, over the watch, and I held it. You were a child, I said. I stopped being a child at 11 minutes past 9, it's past 10. He looked down at my hand on his. He did not pull away. Everyone after that called me the Don, the boss, Mr. Marchetti. You're the first person in a very long time who called me a child. His thumb moved, just slightly, against the side of my hand. I find I don't hate it. I should have taken my hand back. I want the record to show I knew that. Instead, I left it where it was, the watch warm between us, the rain coming sideways off the water, and I felt the drawer I had folded my whole life into come all the way open, and everything I had put away spill out warm into the room. That was the first crack. I have measured enough seams to know that a crack is where the whole thing either fails or finally fits. The weeks after that were the strangest happiness I have known. I would close the shop, and a black car would come, and I would spend the evening in the stone house, and we would not always touch, and we would not always talk. Sometimes he read, and I sewed, and the quiet between us was its own kind of conversation. He took me out on the water once in a small boat, just the two of us, and a man with an earpiece a respectful distance behind, and he told me the names of the islands, and I told him about my grandmother. And when the wind came up cold, he put his jacket over my shoulders without asking, the good gray one, the one I had first cut open, and it smelled of him, and it was warm, and I did not give it back until we were at the dock. But underneath the happiness, something was tightening, and I felt it the way you feel a thread pull before the seam goes. The men at the house grew more numerous. Overhaul. The gates that had stood open were closed more often than not. Tom stopped looking at me like a snake under the door and started looking at me like a thing he had to keep safe, which was worse, because it meant I was now something that could be taken to hurt the man he loved. Why are there more men? I asked Lorenzo one night. Because someone has been pushing at my edges, he said. Testing. That should not have gone missing. A man of mine was followed who is never followed. Small things. The kind of small things that come before a large thing. He was looking out at the dark water. Older than you know. He has wanted to find me for a long time, and lately he is closer than he has been in years, and I do not yet understand how. I did not understand it either. I should have. The answer was hanging in a cedar room at the back of my shop in a 60-year-old jacket, waiting for a friendly phone call. But I was happy, in a way I had buried 2 years before, and stopped expecting to dig back up, and happy people do not look closely at the seams. That is the lesson I keep. Happiness made me as blind as grief had. A woman has to keep her eyes open in both. The trouble came dressed as good news, the way trouble likes to. Glenn called the shop on a Monday, friendly, which should have warned me, because Glenn is never friendly without a reason. He said he had been thinking, and he felt bad about the rent, and he had a buyer interested in some of Daniel's old suits, the fine vintage ones in the back, that Daniel had collected over the years and never sold. Some of them 60 years old. The buyer was a collector, Glenn said, paying top dollar. Would I pull them and have them ready, pressed by Friday? I should have heard it. The man who had been bleeding me dry for 2 years did not suddenly want to do me a favor. And the money would buy me a month, and somewhere underneath I was distracted, in a way I had not been distracted in years, by a stone house above the water and a watch stopped at 9:11. So I pulled the suits. Daniel's collection lived in the cedar room at the back, and I took them down one by one and brushed them and pressed them. And as I worked, I did the thing I always do, which is read them, run my hands inside them, feel the canvas and the padding and the bones of how they were made. And in the lining of one of them, a beautiful midnight blue dinner jacket from the 1960s that did not belong. It was a flat, hard rectangle sewn into the lining at the small of the back, where no tailor would ever put anything, because no tailor would. The stitches holding it in were not Daniel's. Daniel's stitches I would know in my sleep. These were ugly, hurried, the work of someone who had used a curved needle they did not know how to use. I opened the seam with my scissors, and a small black plastic object fell into my hand. It had a tiny light on it. The light was on. I did not understand it. I want that to be clear, in case you are sitting there thinking I should have. I held it in my palm, and I thought it was a button battery from something, a hearing aid, a child's toy, and I was about to set it on the table when the bell over the door rang, and Tom walked in, Lorenzo's Tom, the silver-haired man with the closed-door face, and he was not closed any more. He was the most frightened I had ever seen a man that size be. "Put it down," he said, quietly, "the way you talk to someone holding something that might go off. Vivian." Set it on the table and step back from the window. "What is it?" He crossed the room and looked at it without touching it, the little light burning steady, and the color went out of his face. "It's a transmitter," he said, "a locator. It's been broadcasting. From the lining of a jacket." He looked up at me, and I have never in my life felt the floor move the way it moved then. "How long have these jackets been in this shop, Vivian?" "They've been here for years. They were Daniel's." My voice did not sound like mine. "Glenn asked me to pull them Monday, for a buyer," he said. I stopped, because I watched Tom hear the name Glenn, and watch him understand something a half-second before I did. The car came for me 4 minutes later. Tom would not let me drive. Tom would barely let me lock the shop. We went out of the hill faster than the law allows, and Tom was on the phone the whole way, in a low voice in a language I did not speak, and the one English word he said, twice, hard, was a name. Halloran. When we got to the stone house, there were 3 times as many men as I had ever seen there, and they were not standing still and bored the way I was used to. They were moving with purpose, carrying things, and the gates were shut, and somewhere a generator was running. Tom walked me in fast, a hand at my back, and Lorenzo was on his feet in the glass room, dressed, no blanket, no chair, the sallow gone out of him, and something hard and cold in its place. Man entirely. I had only ever seen the patient. This was the dawn. He looked at me, and then at Tom, and Tom held up his hand, and in the open palm was the little black transmitter. "In the lining of a 60-year-old jacket," Tom said. "In her shop. Her brother-in-law asked her to pull the jackets Monday. For a buyer." The room went so still I could hear the generator outside, and the water, and my own breath. "Sit down, Vivian," Lorenzo said. His voice was very gentle, which was the most frightening thing about it. "I didn't know," I said. "I swear to you. I didn't. I know you didn't." He crossed to me and took both my hands in his, and his hands were steady and mine were not. "Look at me. I know you didn't. You don't have it in you." "That's not what's happening here. What's happening here is that someone used you, and I need you to tell me everything about your brother-in-law, every single thing, starting with the day my name and your name first sat in the same room together. And then I understood, all at once, the whole shape of it, the way you suddenly see the pattern in a cloth you have been staring at too long. They've been tracking you, I said, through me, since the first night, since I came to the house, since before that, maybe. His jaw was tight. Halloran has wanted to know where I sleep for 10 years. I am very hard to find when I am well. I am easy to find when I am hurt, because when I am hurt, I need things. A doctor. A tailor. Something terrible moved behind his eyes. He needed a way to follow me to the one place I'm vulnerable. He needed someone close to me who no one would ever suspect. And then a woman with a sewing kit started getting in and out of my car twice a week. And she was perfect, because she was invisible. The same reason I saw her was the same reason he chose her. And your brother-in-law, who is in Halloran's pocket up to his throat, and sewed a transmitter into a jacket, and got it into your hands, and told you to bring it near me. Daniel, I said, and my voice broke on it. Glenn. He said Daniel could never make the shop pay. He's been bleeding me for 2 years. Lorenzo, those suits, those were Daniel's. Those have been in my shop the whole time. That transmitter is new. Tom said it's new. It's new, Tom said quietly. So Glenn sewed it in Monday, this week, to find you. But I stopped. The pattern kept going. It went somewhere I did not want it to go, and I followed it anyway, because once you see the line of a seam, you cannot unsee it. If Glenn has been in his pocket for years, then Glenn was in his pocket when Daniel... I could not finish. Lorenzo finished it for me very softly, the gentlest cruelty I have ever been shown. Daniel didn't die of a heart attack, did he, Vivian? Not the way you were told. The room, the water, the generator, the whole stone house seemed to tilt, and Lorenzo's hands were the only thing holding me upright. And I heard a sound come out of me that I did not recognize, a sound I did not make even at the funeral, because at the funeral I still believed it was a heart that had stopped, and not a hand that had stopped it. I am going to tell you what we found, because I found it with my own hands, and I want it on the record that it was me. That night I did not go home. There was no home to go to. The shop was being watched, and the apartment above it, and Lorenzo would not hear of me being anywhere but inside his walls, with his men around me. They gave me a room with a bed bigger than my kitchen, and I did not sleep in it. I sat up in the glass room, with the gray going to black over the water, and somewhere around 3 in the morning, when the house had gone quiet, and even Tom had finally sat down, I asked for the jackets. They had brought all of Daniel's suits from the shop, in case any of them carried something the first one had. Lorenzo had not slept either. He sat across from me in the dark by the light of a single lamp, reading every seam with my fingers, the way I had read his suit the first night. I was not looking for transmitters. Tom's men had already swept them. I was looking for Daniel. I do not know how to explain it, except to say that my husband had been a tailor for 40 years, and a tailor's secrets do not live in his face or his words. They live in his linings. Overhaul. In the places only another tailor were not a tailor, and Halloran's men were not tailors, and there was a chance, a thin one, that whatever Glenn had been so afraid Daniel knew, Daniel had hidden where only I would ever find it. I found it in the dinner jacket, the same midnight blue jacket the transmitter had been sewn into. That, it turned out, was not an accident either. Glenn had chosen that jacket on purpose, to get it out of the shop, because that jacket was the one Daniel always wore to the things that mattered. And Glenn had wanted it gone for years, and had never been able to think of a reason. And a transmitter was finally a reason. Behind the inner pocket, under the lining, sewn in with my husband's own small, even invisible stitches, the stitches I would know in the dark, in my sleep, in my grave, was a folded square of paper. It was a list. Daniel's handwriting, careful and slanted, the way he wrote out a customer's measurements, dates, amounts, and down the side, again and again, in my husband's careful hand, the same 2 names, Glenn Cole, Declan Halloran. I did not understand all of it that night. I understood enough. Daniel had found out that his own brother was laundering money through the shop, through the business they shared on paper, running dirty money from Halloran's operation, through Cole and Son, and out the other side, clean, for years, using the partnership Daniel had trusted Glenn with when they were both young. And Daniel had been writing it down, building it, getting ready to do something with it, to take it to someone, the police or the bishop or God himself. And somewhere in that building, Glenn had found out, or Halloran had, and a 40-year tailor with a strong heart had died alone on a Sunday in the back of his own shop, and his brother had stood at the funeral with his hand on my shoulder and told me to be brave. He knew, I said. I was not crying. I was past crying. He found out about his own brother, and he wrote it all down, and he hid it in the one place he knew I'd find it if anything ever happened to him, because he knew. And he didn't tell me. He didn't warn me. He just hid it in a jacket and hoped. My voice was flat and far away. He should have told me. I would have helped him. He didn't tell you to keep you alive, Lorenzo said. A man hides the danger from the woman he loves because he can't stand the thought of her carrying it. It's not the right thing to do, but it's a thing only love does. I looked at the list in my hands, my husband's small careful stitches, still holding the lining open where I had cut it, and I felt the last of the woman I had been for 2 years fall away from me, the tired one, the folded one, the sensible, invisible widow who had been letting it all be taken, because grief made her too weak to hold on. She was gone. Place, someone I had not been since I was a girl at my grandmother's machine, someone with a job in front of her and hands that did not shake. What do we do? I said. Because the correction mattered, because it was the whole turning of my life in 4 words. What do I do? Lorenzo looked at me across the lamp, was not cold now and was not warm now. It was something else, something I had not seen aimed at me in 20 years. It was respect. That, he said slowly, is the most dangerous question you have ever asked. Are you sure you want the answer? That list, I said. Glenn took my marriage and my shop and my whole quiet little life, and now I find out he took the man too. I am very sure, Lorenzo. Tell me what I do. He was quiet for a long moment, the lamp, the water going pale at the edges with the coming morning. In my world, he said finally, when someone takes what is yours, you do not call the men with badges, because the men with badges are slow and easily bought, and Halloran owns half of them. Overhaul, and you make sure the one who took it knows, at the end, exactly whose hand it was. He leaned forward. I can make Glenn disappear tonight. 1 phone call. No, I said. The word came out fast and hard and surprised us both. No, if you make him disappear, then he disappears, and that's a mercy of a mercy. I was on my feet now, the list in my hand, and it's still you doing it. It's still the great Lorenzo Marchetti reaching down to save the poor tired widow. I'm done being saved, Lorenzo. I've been saved my whole life by Daniel, by being careful, by folding myself up small. I held up the list. This is mine. I found it, with my hands in my husband's stitches. Glenn is going to lose everything, and he's going to know, looking right at me, that it was the invisible woman who did it, the one nobody bothered to look at twice, including him. I have measured a great many men in my life. I have never seen one look at me the way Lorenzo Marchetti looked at me then. "All right," he said quietly. "Then we do it your way. And God help your brother-in-law, because your way is worse." It took 11 days. I will not pretend I understood all of it. The moving of money and men. Tangley, the calls Lorenzo made, and the calls Tom made, and the quiet visits to a forensic accountant who owed Lorenzo a favor and who took my husband's hidden list and turned it into something with the weight of a falling building. My part was small and exact, which is how I liked my work. I had 2 years of the shop's books. I had Daniel's records going back 40 years. Every measurement, every payment, every dollar in and out, in his careful hand and then in mine. And it turned out that a tailor's books, kept honestly, are the perfect mirror to hold up against money laundered dishonestly, because the honest numbers show exactly where the dishonest ones do not fit. I sat at a table in the stone house for 11 days with the accountant, and I showed him the seams. Here is where the cloth should lie flat and does not. Here is where the money should add up and does not. Here, and here we did not go to the police. Lorenzo was right about the police. Halloran owned the ones that mattered. We went over them. The accountant knew a woman at the Treasury, a federal one, who could not be bought because she had spent 30 years watching men assume she could be, and she was, it turned out, a woman of about my age who had also spent a long time being looked through. She looked at what we built, and she did not look through it. She looked right at it. She came to the stone house twice, the Treasury woman, in a plain coat, with a plain leather bag, and the second time she sat with me, alone at the table, while the men talked in the other room, and she ran her finger down a column of my husband's numbers, and then a column of Glenn's, and she said quietly, "You know what most people miss? They think the lie is in the big number. The big number is always clean. They scrub it. The lie is always in the small ones, or where a man gets lazy because he thinks no one counts that low." She looked up at me. "You count that low, don't you?" "For 40 years. Every hem, every spool, every quarter. It's the job." "It's the job," she agreed. "Funny how the jobs nobody respects are the ones that see everything." She tapped the page. "This, right here. He moved money through a building expense that doesn't exist. 3 years running, and rounded it to look like a contractor. But a real contractor's invoice has tax on it, and his doesn't, and a tailor's books would catch that in a second, because a tailor pays tax on every yard of cloth she buys, and she knows exactly what it looks like." She closed the folder. "Your husband knew that too. That's why he wrote it down. He wasn't building evidence for a court. He was building it for you, because he knew you'd be the only one who could read it." I had to leave the room for a moment after that. I went and stood at the glass and looked at the gray water until my face was my own again. Daniel had not just hidden the truth where I would find it. He had hidden it in a language only I could read. 40 years of small honest numbers, so that one day, if the worst came, his wife could hold his brother's lie up to the light and see exactly where it did not fit. It was the most loving thing he ever did, and the loneliest, and I have never decided which of those is the larger. The reckoning, when it came in 2 parts, the way the best cut suit has an outside and a lining. Federal. The outside, the part the world saw 11 days after I cut open a midnight blue jacket. Men with windbreakers and a warrant walked into Glenn Cole's house and his bank and the 3 shell companies he thought no one would ever find, and they took it all, the money, the building, the partnership, the watch that cost more than my month. The papers said it was a long investigation. They said it had been years in the making. They did not say it had been a widow with a sewing kit and her dead husband's stitches, and that was fine with me. I did not do it to be in the papers. But there was a lining, the part only Glenn and I saw. I asked for that. I asked Lorenzo, and he did not like it, and he did it anyway, because he had stopped being a man who saved me, and become a man who let me. The morning before the windbreakers came, alone, except I was never alone again. There were men of Lorenzo's I could not see watching every door. And I called Glenn friendly, the way he had called me, and I told him I had been thinking, and I had decided to sell him the rest of the suits, the whole collection, top dollar, would he come by. He came by. He sat in the measuring chair, the same chair where Lorenzo had bled the first night, the same chair where Glenn had told me my rent was going up over my husband's still warm grave, and he smiled at me, the smile of a man who has already decided how a thing will end. And I laid the list on the cutting table in front of him, Daniel's list, his own brother's handwriting, dates and amounts, Glenn Cole and Declan Halloran again and again down the side. I watched the smile come off his face the way a basted seam comes out, all at once, the whole shape of it collapsing. From the lining of the blue jacket, I said, the one you wanted out of the shop so badly. Daniel sewed it in himself. He knew, Glenn. He knew what you were, and he knew what you'd do, and he hid the proof in the one place he knew you'd never look and I'd always find, because you were never a tailor, Glenn, and Daniel was, and so am I. Back up, slowly with my chalk-white fingers, the way I fold everything. By tomorrow morning it'll be with people you can't pay off. The building, the money, all of it, gone. And I wanted you to know, before it happens, looking right at me, who did it. Not Marchetti, not the police. Me, the tired old widow you've been bleeding for 2 years. Wuggs. The one you never once looked at twice. He stood up so fast the chair went over, and for one moment something murderous crossed his soft, restless face. And for one moment I was afraid. The first time in weeks, the real cold thing. And then the bell over the door rang, the same bell that has rung since the Carter administration, and Tom stepped inside, silver-haired, closed-door face, and Glenn looked at him and understood that there was nowhere in the world he could put his hands on me, that someone would not be watching. He left without the suits. The bell rang, the same as it does for everyone. Declan Halloran is the other part, and I will tell you only this much, because Lorenzo was right. You change a little every time someone tells you a true thing, and I have changed you enough. Halloran was the man who came in late to her dinner 39 years ago and kissed Gennaro Marchetti on both cheeks and then stood up to make a toast. He was younger then. He was the trusted friend with the gun. Lorenzo had known for 39 years and had never been able to prove it, never been able to prove it, never been able to reach him, because Halloran was careful and powerful and surrounded. But Halloran had made one mistake. He had reached for Lorenzo through a transmitter in a tailor's jacket, and in doing so he had put his own name, in writing, in a dead tailor's careful hand, on a list that went to a woman at the Treasury who could not be bought. The same federal lining that took Glenn reached higher and wider than Glenn ever knew. because dirty money does not run alone, it runs in a line, and once you have the thread you can follow it all the way back to the spool. I will not tell you what happened to Declan Halloran. I will tell you that on the morning the news of it reached the stone house, Lorenzo Marchetti went into the room I had never been allowed into, his father's old study, and he was in there a long time, and when he came out he was holding the pocket watch. The round silver one stopped at 11 minutes past 9. He put it in my hand. It stopped the night. They took everything from me, he said. I kept it stopped for 39 years because the man who did it was still walking around free, and to fix it would have been a lie. It would have said the wound was closed when it wasn't. He closed my fingers over it. His hand steady, mine for once steady too. It's closed now. You helped close it, so I want you to have it, and I want you to take it to a watchmaker, and I want you to start it again. I looked down at the watch, and warm in my palm, the hand stopped at the worst minute of a young man's life. Why me? I said. You have a list of people you trust. I talked my way onto it. Why give the most important thing you own to a tailor you met 6 weeks ago, bleeding on a wooden chair? He took a long time to answer. Outside the water had gone, for once, a kind of silver instead of gray. Because you are the only person who ever looked at me, he said, and saw a man who needed mending, instead of a man to be afraid of, or a man to use. You sewed me up with the wrong thread in the right hands, and you threw me out into the street because I wouldn't tell you my name, and you have never once, in 6 weeks, treated me like a king or a monster. You treat me like a man with a torn side and a stopped watch, and a great deal of work left to do. His thumb moved against the back of my hand, the way it had the day of the rain. I am 58 years old, Vivian. Overhaul. I have buried a father and built an empire, and killed the men who needed killing, and I have been, this entire time, since I was 19, completely alone, in the way that a man, surrounded by 200 loyal people, can be the most alone person alive. And then a 52-year-old widow with chalk on her fingers told me to sit down before I fell down, and I have not been alone since. I am going to tell you that I kissed him then in his father's study, with the watch warm between our hands, because that is what happened, and because the world has spent a long time telling women my age that this part of the story is over for us. That passion, and being chosen, and being looked at like the only true thing in the room, is a thing that belongs to other, younger women, and I am here to tell you it is a lie. The same as every other lie I had folded myself up, small to believe. It was not over. It had not even started. The shop is still on the corner of Atwell's Avenue, under the green awning, with the bell that has rung since the Carter administration. The building is mine now, free and clear. It turns out that when the federal government seizes a man's ill-gotten property and a quiet arrangement is made, the deed can find its way back to the woman it was stolen from. The sign still says Cole & Son. I had it repainted, fresh and green, but I kept the words because Daniel earned them, and because Daniel, in the end, did the bravest thing a frightened man can do, which is leave the truth where the person he loved would find it. I took the watch to an old man on Wickenden Street, who has been fixing timepieces for 60 years, and he opened the case and clucked his tongue at the damage, and said it would never keep perfect time again. Too much had been broken inside it too long. I told him that was all right. I told him I did not need it to be perfect. I only needed it to move. It moves. It runs a little slow, and it loses a few minutes every week, and every Sunday Lorenzo and I sit in the back of the shop where my husband died, and I wind it and set it right. The two of us, the Dawn and the Tailor, mending the same small broken thing over and over, because some things are not worth fixing once and forgetting. Some things are worth fixing every single week for the rest of your life. 2 years ago, I buried my husband and began quietly to disappear, and I told myself it was wisdom. It was not wisdom. It was surrender. And the difference between the two is the whole of the life I almost did not live. So here is what I want to ask you before I let you go. Daniel hid the truth to protect me and his life, and cost me 2 years of grief built on a lie. He thought he was being loving. Lorenzo says hiding danger from the one you love is a thing only love does. But I will never know what I would if Daniel had only trusted me with the truth while he was still alive to trust me with it. So tell me, when you love someone and you find out something that could destroy you both, do you carry it alone to keep them safe, or do you owe them the truth, even when the truth is the most dangerous thing you own? Tell me what you would have done. I have been thinking about it every Sunday with a slow watch in my hands, and I still do not know.